The engine had been silent for 8 long days. Every elite technician hired by the billionaire had failed. More than $800,000 had disappeared into diagnostics, replacement parts, and emergency consultations. Reporters were already calling it the most embarrassing luxury car failure of the year. Then, just as another expensive specialist admitted defeat, a quiet single father wearing grease-stained work clothes stepped forward and asked one simple question that made the entire garage fall silent. 8 minutes later, the impossible happened. If you believe kindness is more valuable than money, humility is stronger than pride, and everyone deserves a second chance. Please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to Enlightened Story for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. Alexandra Hale had earned every headline written about her. At just 42 years old, she had built one of the fastest-growing technology companies in North America. Investors admired her fearless decisions. Business magazines celebrated her discipline, and competitors respected her relentless determination. Success had brought her wealth beyond imagination, but it had also built invisible walls around her life. Every conversation revolved around business. Every relationship became a negotiation, and every mistake felt like a threat to the empire she had spent 20 years creating. Among all the luxuries she owned, nothing meant more to her than her limited edition Bugatti. It wasn't simply a car. It represented every sleepless night, every risk she had taken, and every obstacle she had overcome. She often joked that the car reminded her how far she had come from the tiny apartment where she once counted every dollar. One bright morning, while preparing to drive to a charity event supporting engineering students, the Bugatti refused to start. The dashboard flashed a series of mysterious warnings before everything went dark. The world's most advanced diagnostic computers were connected within hours. Engineers flew in from different cities. Specialized components were ordered overnight. Entire electronic systems were replaced even though nobody could prove they were faulty. 8 days passed. More than $800,000 disappeared. Nothing worked. The luxury service center became increasingly tense. Highly trained technicians whispered to one another, worried that their reputations were collapsing alongside the silent supercar. Every attempted repair ended with the same lifeless engine. Alexandra grew more frustrated each afternoon. She never shouted, but disappointment filled every expression on her face. The money did not bother her nearly as much as the failure. She had built her life on solving impossible problems. Yet this machine refused to cooperate. Across town, 38-year-old Daniel Reyes finished another day at the small neighborhood repair shop where he had worked for nearly 15 years. Daniel was raising his 10-year-old son, Henry, alone after losing his wife to a sudden illness several years earlier. Every morning, he packed Henry's lunch before sunrise, walked him to school, and spent the day repairing vehicles belonging to ordinary families who depended on affordable transportation. He had once dreamed of designing engines for international racing teams. Life, however, had demanded different priorities. Hospital bills, grief, and the responsibility of raising his son had quietly replaced those ambitions. Yet he never complained. He believed honest work in a loving home mattered more than impressive job titles. Late that afternoon, Daniel delivered replacement parts to another mechanic working inside the luxury service center where Alexandra's Bugatti remained surrounded by experts. Curiosity drew his eyes toward the famous car. He noticed something unusual almost immediately. Instead of walking closer, he quietly observed how the technicians repeatedly focused on complicated electronic systems while ignoring something surprisingly basic. One employee noticed Daniel watching and laughed softly, reminding him that specialists from around the world had already failed. Daniel smiled politely. He never claimed to know more. He simply asked whether anyone had inspected a small mechanical connection hidden beneath one of the protective panels. The room fell strangely quiet. Several engineers exchanged uncertain looks. Someone admitted that the area had been assumed functional because computer diagnostics showed no obvious fault. Alexandra happened to overhear the conversation. Tired, exhausted, and willing to try absolutely anything, she authorized Daniel to take a careful look. Some technicians rolled their eyes. Others folded their arms, convinced the neighborhood mechanic would embarrass himself. Daniel slowly removed a protective cover. He examined a tiny connector hidden beneath layers of expensive components. Years of repairing ordinary vehicles had trained him to trust his senses before trusting computers. He noticed an almost invisible manufacturing defect causing an intermittent electrical interruption whenever the engine attempted its startup sequence. The replacement parts installed during the previous week had never addressed the true problem. Daniel carefully cleaned the connection, adjusted its position by only a fraction, secured it properly, and reassembled the panel. Barely 8 minutes had passed. He stepped back. Alexandra pressed the ignition button. The Bugatti roared to life instantly. Its engine echoed throughout the service center. Silence followed. No one moved. The impossible had become reality. Some technicians stared at diagnostic screens, unable to believe what they had witnessed. Others simply looked at Daniel with complete disbelief. Alexandra slowly stepped out of the driver's seat. She studied the quiet mechanic standing before her. There was no arrogance in his expression, no celebration, no demand for recognition, only relief that the problem had finally been solved. When Alexandra asked how he had discovered the fault so quickly, Daniel answered with gentle honesty. He explained that expensive technology often encouraged people to stop paying attention to simple details. Machines could provide information, but experience still required patience, observation, and humility. Those words stayed with Alexandra. Instead of writing Daniel a large check and walking away, she asked him to tell her about himself. For the first time in years, someone listened as Daniel spoke about Henry, about balancing work and fatherhood, and about the dreams he had quietly set aside after his wife's passing. Alexandra listened without interrupting. She realized that while she had spent years surrounded by brilliant executives, she had forgotten how extraordinary ordinary people could be. Several weeks later, Alexandra visited Daniel's modest repair shop during another sunny afternoon. She watched him explain engine basics to local teenagers interested in mechanics. He encouraged every question, praised every effort, and never made anyone feel foolish for making mistakes. She saw leadership that could never be purchased. Rather than offering charity, Alexandra offered opportunity. She invited Daniel to lead a new engineering innovation division within her company, one focused on practical problem solving instead of unnecessary complexity. She insisted that experienced mechanics work alongside university graduates so both groups could learn from one another. Daniel hesitated. He loved the repair shop. He loved serving his community. After several thoughtful conversations, they designed something neither had expected. Daniel would remain connected to the neighborhood garage while also mentoring young engineers several days each week. His son Henry became one of the happiest people in the city. He watched his father receive the respect he had quietly earned over decades without ever demanding attention. The new engineering program transformed the company itself. Young graduates learned that textbooks mattered, but so did listening. Experienced mechanics discovered that innovation and tradition could strengthen each other rather than compete. Alexandra found herself changing too. She spent less time chasing headlines and more time supporting apprenticeship programs for talented young people who could not afford expensive universities. One afternoon, during the opening ceremony of a new technical education center, reporters expected Alexandra to speak about business success. Instead, she pointed toward Daniel standing beside Henry. She explained that the greatest investment her company had ever made wasn't another building or another product. It was learning to recognize wisdom regardless of where it came from. The audience applauded. Daniel smiled awkwardly, wishing the attention would pass. That humble reaction only strengthened everyone's respect for him. Months later, the famous Bugatti remained perfectly maintained. Visitors often admired the beautiful machine, but Alexandra no longer viewed it as the symbol of her success. Instead, it reminded her that true greatness begins the moment pride makes room for humility. Before this story ends, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever met someone whose talent was hidden behind an ordinary job or simple appearance? Leave a meaningful comment below, because your experience may inspire someone else to look beyond first impressions. As another peaceful afternoon sunlight reflected across the polished Bugatti, Alexandra watched Daniel and Henry laughing together outside the engineering center. She realized that while $800,000 had failed to solve a simple problem, 8 minutes of patience, experience, and quiet wisdom had changed far more than a luxury car. It had transformed lives, opened doors for future generations, and reminded everyone watching that the most valuable people in the world are often the ones no one notices until the moment they quietly change everything. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to USA Enlightened Stories so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember, true brilliance doesn't announce itself with expensive clothes, impressive titles, or loud applause. Sometimes it arrives wearing work boots, carrying a toolbox, and changing the world one simple act of kindness at a time.